Hey y'all, welcome to the Until Jesus Runs This Campus podcast. I am your host, Lauren, and we're back for week 2. This week we're going to be talking all about friendships and having friends in faith, having friends not in faith. What does that look like in your college and young adult life? And today I get to be joined with Taylor, who's one of my little besties.
Hello.
And so, she recently took a position helping with our college ministry, and I'll let you explain all of the things that you do.
Well, to go off of that, I do help with the college ministry here. I also help with the youth ministry here at Timber Ridge. I'm a mom.
She's the cutest little baby.
She's pretty cute.
Kip.
I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I'm a lover of Jesus.
Amen. Come on, somebody.
And that's me.
So today we are going to be talking about friendship and just all things. I think it's something that young adults and especially girls in college struggle with a lot, is friendship, and how are you letting your friends affect your life and all that stuff. So what, to you, kind of to start it off, what does like good friendship look like to you, especially like in your young adult life? I mean, you're a little bit older than me, just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Friendship is vital. I mean, like, obviously I'm married, so like Chase is my best friend, love him. But like at the same time, like friendship is so important in all aspects of your life, not just, high school, college, like in every aspect of your life. It's so important to have those people that are just there for you and like on your team. I guess to go along with that, like in your college years, it's so important because you're going from like this time of like, coming through the education system, like going through school, you go first, second, third, blah, 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 like all of that. And you know exactly what is to come in those years. Like we're all in the same level of life, I guess. Like we're all within the same age all through high school. And then like you graduate and you go to college, and like, I don't know about you, but like I always had friends that were older than me. And now it's just kind of funny because I have friends that are like a lot younger than me. And so, like to go into this new life in college, like you really are just becoming your own person. Like in high school, you're following your parents' rules and, all of that. But then to get into college and like really make life your own, like getting a group of friends during that time is just so important because they're going to lead you in whatever direction you're going, like wherever you're facing, wherever you're looking at is where you're going to follow. And so if you're have this group of friends that's not the best for you, where are you going to go? You're going to go in that direction. But if you have friends that are rooted in a relationship with the Lord, like that's where they're going to be pushing you. So
I always heard Pastor Nick used to tell us all the time, I'm sure you've heard this, but that he would say, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Or show me your 5 closest friends and I'll show you what your life is going to look like in 5 years. And I feel like I always was like, oh, whatever. That's such a dad thing to say. But truly, like, I feel like, and that was a lot of my story, was just being surrounded by a lot of people who were not the best. And so I was led in that way. And then I think there was a lot of turning points for me. But I remember one night sitting and talking to Joe and just asking her, being like, I had a friend who was actually my roommate freshman year. I don't know if I even told you this, but she was very not a good influence. She was portrayed herself to me as somebody that she wasn't when we first moved in together, and just got into the party scene and all of the things, and she was not a good friend to me. And so at one point I was getting so hurt by her, but I literally sat down with Joe and was like, I think the thing that I'm struggling with most is that I know she's not going to be in church if we're not friends, and not to boast about myself, but I was the only reason why she was coming to T-Rock. I was the only reason why she was active and volunteering and stuff, and I knew the moment that I stepped away from her. And Joe told me, she was like, at some points there's going to be friends in your life that you have to step away from, and you can still love them, but love them from afar. And hopefully one day that'll plant a seed in them to realize that they need to change in order to get closer to God and get closer to real friends and good
Protect
friends.
your peace.
Yeah.
Like, for sure.
And so that's something that's always stuck with me is like, but also the fact that you get to like choose who you're surrounded with,
And like going off of the part of the beginning of you saying like your freshman year, like that is such a like vital point in college of like going into your freshman year. It's like you're going into this new place. For me, I was 8 hours away from home. So like I was walking into this like new world and like having to figure out new friends, new like people to hang out with, what to do. Like, at that point, as soon as you step foot on a college campus, like you have a choice to make. And I think a lot of people are so desperate to find their friends in the first week that they're at school that like we just will literally grab at anything. And like we don't truly evaluate like the quality of those people or the quality of those friendships.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that you can't have people that are outside of the faith to be friends with. I just think that you need to be very aware of the direction that they're going with their life, and especially like allowing them to speak into your life in any way. Like, I'm sorry, but I do have friends that are outside of the faith and, like I still have some friends from college that are not, followers of Jesus, and they give advice, but I take all of it with a grain of salt. And like, you always have to go back to like, is it something that is rooted in the word? And if it cannot be backed up in the word, then that's not something that I should take that advice. And so
that's so good. Okay, so you mentioned something about like having friends outside of the faith. How do you feel about this was a lot of what I wanted to talk about, but like about having friendships. Do you feel like you can still be a good follower of Christ and not completely surround yourself with like not perfect followers of Christ, because nobody's a perfect follower, but do you feel like you can still like hold a good relationship with Christ and not be surrounded by everybody who's super deep in their faith?
No. I don't know. Like, I feel like that, just like you said, Nick said, but the quote that goes off of is you are the sum of the 10 people that you hang out with.
Yeah.
And so if one of those 10 people is a follower of Christ, like the sum is still like, like the average of that is still not great, And so do I think that you can have friends that are outside of the faith? Yes. Do I think that needs to be majority of your friend group? And like, when I think of friend group, I mean like those people that you hang out with, you've got your acquaintances and you've got your friends and you've got like your inner circle. And like, if your inner circle is made up and you're a follower of Christ and you are looking to live your life in a way that glorifies God, if your inner circle is filled with unbelievers, how on earth can you even be following God? Like that's got to take some serious discipline. Yeah. And like, it's also got to be awkward, like those people that you spend majority of your time with aren't living the way that you are wanting to live, even if you are extremely disciplined. Like, how does that dynamic even look? Because it's got to be like some of the most awkward things. Like those are, things that collide in, as being a follower. And so I don't see how it's possible. If it is, by all means, like, come on, tell me how you're doing it. But like, I also think that, and going back to just conversations and people being there for you, of like, there are people that I have a conversation with that may even say that they're a follower, but also like aren't living it out
actively. Yeah.
But like when I have a conversation with them, it can be some of the most draining conversations. But like when you're having a conversation with another believer, and like it's not just constantly talking smack on people, it's not always drama and like complaining and all of that. Like when it's not like that, it's so uplifting. And like I could talk for hours to someone who's not doing that. And like, not to say that you can never complain or never whatever. Like, no, but it's hard.
I remember when I was in high school, I was at my parents' now their church, but the church that I pretty much grew up in, and our like Sunday life group leader, she was like, somebody had mentioned how they felt like they were gossiping too much, and she said, well, pray to God that he'll reveal to you when you're gossiping. And I remember like leaving and being like, why would somebody do that? But I kind of want to test it out. And I did, and I sat and I was like, God, just revealed to me, like, if I'm sitting here and like complaining or trash talking somebody, like, I want you to make it evident that like that's not okay to you. And oh my gosh, like the amount of times that I would be like sitting and being like, oh, so and so blah blah blah, and then I would feel like conviction and be like, oh, I need to stop this. And so that's so real. I don't know, but I feel like, so a couple years ago, when I like finally found like my good group of friends, and that consisted of a couple people who separated from that group, I guess. And so after that, and I was in a friend group with a bunch of crazy people. Like, we were all just crazy. But we had so much fun. Like, I remember, like, we would go out and, like, we wouldn't even have to be, like, out at parties or stuff. We would have fun together. But I remember, like, none of us were really super, like, great in our walk with faith or with God. Like, we weren't actively, like, every day. Like, I was out at the Twisted J and making choices that I shouldn't have been. But I remember also just realizing that, like, those people were some of the people who I feel like have cared about me the most. And as I, like, started realizing, because I've been in a leadership role at Timber Ridge or T-Rock for several years now, and so I finally was like, God really was like, you need to get your stuff together. Like, you are literally going and talking on stage, and then people are at the bar seeing you like double fist and vodka Powerades. Like, where are we at? Where's our priorities at?
Yeah.
And so eventually I just kind of started stepping back from that, and for a while I felt like the guilt of, like, almost like when you get, and I don't know if you ever felt this, but when because you and Chase started dating in college, right? Mm-hmm. And so when y'all were, I don't know if y'all felt this, but as, like, friends in your friend group get boyfriends and they start taking more time away with their boyfriends, then you're like, oh, well, you don't care about us anymore. Yeah. And it's like, no, I do care about you. They
always used to say, you've changed.
Yeah. Like, I'm like, well,
what does that mean?
I mean,
I have changed.
I found somebody new to, like, love, like, I would hope I would a little bit. Yeah. And so, but almost like when I started or stopped going out and, like, partying so much with them and started just staying home more, I, for a while, felt like that. And I would feel like I was the party pooper. Like, well, if Lauren doesn't want to come out with us, then that makes us be like, well, you know, none of us want to go out anymore. Yeah. And so then, but then, because I found myself, like, being bold and God calling me to be bold in that, then my friends, like, stopped going out so much, and we were able to still, like, go out. I hope and I want everybody to realize, like, going out to the bar is not always a bad thing. Yeah. Like, we can go out and, you know, like, act normal and not, like, be buck wild and still, like, have fun and enjoy time with our friends. But I think for me, and I've talked so much about this with, like, a lot of my close friends in my life, but alcohol became, like, a really bad addiction for me, and I went through a really hard breakup several years ago, and it became, like, an addiction. And so then I realized that, like, I needed to pull away from that, because for me, like, it was holding me back in my walk with God, because I couldn't just go to the bar and have one drink. And so I don't think it's bad, but for me it wasn't good. But when I started, like, all of this to say, I feel like I'm rambling, when I started pulling back from that, then my friends started pulling back. And I remember something that I remember, like, so clearly with one of my really good friends, Karis. She was dating a guy, and she started setting boundaries in their relationship, and he, like, came up to me one day and was like, I don't know what you're doing in her life, but, like, you're changing her. And I sat with Karis after that, and I was like, dude, like, what is he talking about? Am I changing in a bad way? Like, and she was like, no, I'm literally just, like, starting to open my eyes to the fact of, like, what God truly calls us to be, and setting boundaries in relationships is hard, but that was part of what she had to do and what she felt God calling her to do. But because of that, and I don't think that her faith is just like God worked in her life, but I think because
but you were the seed.
Yeah, because of me stepping back, brought her closer to Christ. And I've seen some of my other old roommates and friends that will just start attending church, whereas like in the past that wasn't even a thing, you know, in their thought process. And so I think in regards to like friends outside of faith and stuff, like you were saying, you can't let them hold place in like your head and your mental space, but also when you find yourself in relationships or friendships, not relationships, with people, like be bold.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important.
Well, and that's like, I mean, don't allow those people to like speak into your life in a sense where like it always carries so much weight, but like still speak into their lives. You know, like I feel like in that situation, you were speaking into her life and she was allowing that, and like for her to allow that into her life, it changed her life. Yeah. You know, and so you were the seed that literally changed her life. And yes, I hate when people say like, you've changed. And I'm like, first of all, whether I'm like living the Christian life or not, like I would hope that we're all changing. Like, let's not, I'm sorry, but we all know that thing where like everyone especially us millennial people, we start seeing all the things that we like were posting on Facebook and like all of that from like years ago. I'm like, no, who let me post that? Like Gina.
A few years ago I went to LJT and I wasn't even drinking. Like I was just there honestly as the DD for my friends. And Joe told me one day, she was like, you as a leader like should not be posting at LJT. And I literally was like, went to all my friends and I was like, this is crazy that she is telling me this. Like, I wasn't even doing anything wrong and I was so butthurt. And now I look back and I'm like, why would I want to advertise?
Yeah, like what's the perception that you were even doing?
Yeah. And so I don't know. I definitely, I don't know. That got so off track. I'm like, no. But I don't know. I think especially in college, and in a lot of like bigger colleges, I think it's going to be really hard to find yourself surrounded with people who are completely like rooted in the gospel and completely living for Christ. And so I think our mission shouldn't so much be as to like, obviously consider who you're allowing to be part of your life, but also understanding that you're in a crazy world.
Yeah, and those people are going through the same thing. You know, like, and you know, last week on the podcast you said something about like finding your husband in the church or something, and I was like, I remember in high school someone coming up to me and telling me, just make sure whenever you go off to college, sweetie, like you find your husband in a church. I found my husband at a football game, and then
church can be crazy sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, like really, but I mean, there's also like those people that like they have that mask on and they walk into church and they have that mask on. But not to say that like Chase and I's story is like perfect by any means. There's lots of rocky road there, but like even and kind of going off the missionary dating thing or the missionary friendship thing, like we are meant to be disciples. Like we're meant, and friendships, we're meant to be disciples. Yeah. In marriage or in a relationship, like we shouldn't have to change our significant other or a boyfriend or whatever, like in that way. And after you said that last week, after y'all talked about that last week in the podcast, I went home and I like talked to Chase and I was like, so like obviously Chase was backstory. He was raised Catholic, like didn't become a Christian, start going to church with me until we were like engaged actually. Yeah. And so we were really struggling in the sense of like getting married in the Catholic church or getting married in the Christian church. And my thought process on it was like, well, I chose my faith whenever I was 16 years old. I chose to get baptized and I chose to follow the Lord and be a Christian, whereas he was baptized as a baby and like it wasn't his choice and he wasn't practicing. But then I was also like in college going through all the things like partying, doing all that. My freshman, sophomore, junior, probably senior year too. I was doing all those things. And I was like, but how can I say we can get married in a Catholic church if I'm also not practicing being a Christian. Like, I'm going out here and I'm doing all this stuff. And so then Chase and I mean, not really Chase and I kind of had this conscious decision of like, well, if I'm going to have any argument at all to say that we need to get married in a Christian church, not a Catholic church, like, I probably should start practicing my faith. Yeah. Right. And so I found a church like by myself, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to start going to this church. Do you want to go? And he was like, nah. I was like, okay. And so I just kept saying that. And like, for a while, like, I think that it's really hard for people to go to a church when they're dating someone and like that significant other not go either. Yeah. But like, for the first 3 times that I had asked, like, hey, I'm going to this church, you want to go? And he would say no. And so then I wouldn't go either because I'd want to spend all my time with him. Yeah. But like finally the 4th time I was like, hey, I'm going to this church. Like, if you want to go, you can go. Great. But like, I'm going. Yeah. And so I finally went, and I went by myself. And the next time, guess who was sitting right next to me?
Chase Tipper.
Yeah. And so that's a whole other story for another time of like going on from there and like how we, whatever. But yeah, going off the like missionary dating thing, not dating, missionary friendship
and missionary dating. I was
explain what missionary dating is first, because I was like, what does that even mean?
I was writing and like coming up with things to talk about on this podcast, and Taylor and I share an office, and so I was writing them down, and she's like, missionary friendship, missionary dating, what is that? She was like, I heard you talk about it last week, but what even is that? And so, okay, so I think my parents were, and I talked about this a little bit last week, I think, but my parents were always super adamant that I needed to find somebody like in the church, like they needed to be a Christian for me to date them, amongst the other lists of all the million of other things that my dad was like, a man has to be. And I remember always being like, well, what if they're not? Like, that's not right for me to not give them a chance just because they don't believe in Christ. Like, what if I'm the person who changes them? And so we were talking about this yesterday. So missionary dating is basically where you date somebody and like you willingly know that you are rooted in Christ, like you're rooted in the gospel. That is your whole life. That is how you live your whole life around. And you not purposely, but you find somebody and you really like them, but then they're not rooted in Christ. They don't even believe in Christ. And so you're like, oh, well, it's okay for me to date them because I can change them. Yeah. And so then we talked about that and friendships and what that looks like and stuff. So I don't know if you want to go into a little bit of what we talked about.
So my thought on like missionary friendships, like wanting to change your friends, I don't necessarily think that it would be needing to change your friends, but like discipling to your friends, like and I've always said this, and I did not even plan on talking about this. I used to be a teacher, and I taught at like low income schools until really I got here. And I don't really know if Stephenville's necessarily considered a low income school, but whatever. I don't think so. And so like, I always just felt like, okay, that's my ministry area. Like wherever you are, wherever you're planted is where you're to minister to people. And no, I wasn't out here being like, Jesus, you need, I would have been fired, but I was not fired. So, like that is my ministry area. And so I went to a private school in high school. They go to school, like the high school goes to school 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then the elementary school goes Tuesday, Thursday. Mm-hmm. When we moved back to Texas, I was like, I'm going to go work at Grace Prep. Like, I only have to go to work 2 days a week. Like, it would be great. And then, I just kept hearing God tell me, like, that's not the place for you. Yeah. And I'm like, why? I only want to go to work 2 days a week. Like, come on. And so I just kept, and I loved Grace Prep every time, or not every time, but, like while I was in high school, like I loved it. And, you have those other private school kids and you're like, I hated this place. I want to get out of here. Like, that's honestly where I like first encountered Jesus. I never was like, I never grew up in the church. I didn't know anything really. And so going to that school, like the reasons for me going to that school are like not even like, it wasn't because I did anything wrong or anything. It was solely because of some stuff that was going on at the high school that I was supposed to go to.
Yeah.
And like there were people that didn't like me. And so my mom was like, you ain't going to that school, because she worked there too. So she knew all the tea. And so she was like, you're not going to that school. And I was like, but why? And then she told me that I only had to go to school 3 days a week. And I was like, absolutely, okay, I'm out, I'm going. And so, anyways, God just kept telling me, like, Taylor, this isn't the place for you. And I was like, but why? Come on now. Like, I want to stay. And it was whenever I was pregnant with Cam, I actually had an interview and I didn't go to it. One, because I didn't want to drive that far to go to Arlington. And like, it would have been an 1.5 hour drive 2 days a week, which wasn't bad. But like, I was pregnant. Like, I didn't want to put the baby in daycare here and then like have to drive all the way there or something happen or anything. And so I kind of backed off of that. But like, it was also God telling me, like, when you only surround yourself with people who look just like you, think just like you, believe just like you, how are you supposed to make disciples?
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like where I kept thinking whenever we were talking about missionary friendship, I was like, well, if I only surround myself with people who look like me and think like me, how am I supposed to make disciples? Like, that's literally what I'm called to do. That's what Jesus calls all of us to do. And so how can I do that? And so I then had to kind of reevaluate that. Like, them speaking into your life is one thing, but being friends with them and like showing them Jesus and teaching them Jesus and like being a light in their life is what we're called to do. And so missionary friendship, yes. Missionary besties, no.
No, I think just listening to what you were saying, it kind of reminds me of like, I don't know, a thought just came to my head, but of the fact that like, if we are truly rooted in the Bible and in what Christ says and in who Christ calls us to be, if he called us to just be around other followers and to just be around other people who were super strong in their faith, how would we ever change the world for his kingdom? And so I think it's so important to, and we even talked about this last night, a great way to kind of grow friendships and make friendships is through life groups. And so our church has
just a little life group plug in there. I like it.
Our life group has been super I honestly went into it with a terrible attitude because I've had terrible life groups. Not that the people were bad, but just with college students, you get commitment of maybe 2 weeks at a life group, and then they're like, okay, bye, I think I would rather be somewhere else. And I was that person at one point, and so I went into it really. I remember James texted me and he was like, Cody said we can either lead a life group separate or we can lead one together, so do you want to lead a life group? And I was like, I guess so. But truly, our life group this last semester and this semester has been like so life-changing for them and for me, and we've gotten to see people open up, and we've gotten to see people like celebrate milestones in their life that before life group, like, that wasn't even a thought. And we were talking to Emma last night about we were talking, I didn't even know what we started talking about, but she was like, well, how do we like truly show change to people without being like Jesus and like just overboarding them with like, I always heard it as a Bible thumper, and so somebody who's
Bible
just
beater.
like,
That's
and I told her, I was like, genuinely, literally just live your life as you know God has called you to do, and other people will either see that and I think it's so often like talked about of like, oh, people will see you and they'll come up. I have never once had somebody be like, why do you look so happy?
Yeah.
Because I don't most of the time. And I told her, I was like, honestly, I think, and I could get on a whole tangent about like the whole kind of how social media and TikTok and the world has made Christianity and worship and all of the things like look so perfect. And that's what I told them, because our church took a group to Passion Conference this past January. We're still in January. Oh my God, this has been the longest month ever. But people come off of that, and I didn't get to go this year, but I've gotten to go in past years, and you come off of it almost like with like the church camp high of like, Jesus, like he's so great.
I'm gonna go change the world. Yeah. And then you get home and you're on the couch
because
for a week,
you're like surrounded with 60,000 people, and
Yeah.
so of course it's like beautiful and it's a life-changing moment, and not to discount that, because I know that it's real, and that's how I kind of got into a lot of the things that God has called me to do, was through submitting to him at Passion Conference. Yeah. But I think things like Passion and TikTok and Instagram and all of the things put out this reality of like worship looks like closed eyes with your hands up, like beautiful, and you know, being faithful in your relationship with God looks like opening up your Bible and having beautiful highlighted verses and all these things. And yeah, it can look like that, but also Christianity holds a lot of ugly and a lot of like persecution and a lot of like people truthfully just coming up and being like beating you down literally. And like that's what we were talking about today, is like I literally have had a terrible day and everything I just felt like was going wrong, and that is part of like there's such a not stigma but just a thought around like especially baptism of like, well, when I get dunked in the water, like God will change me. And yes, God changes you, but God doesn't make you perfect. He changes your outlook on life, but he's not going to make your life perfect. Yeah. And so just because you got baptized or you believe in Christ and what he's done for us doesn't mean that your world is going to be perfect and you're never going to struggle again. Because
in fact, as soon as you get baptized, typically the enemy's like at your
this
head.
Is where
you
to
are
attack.
Literally like target on your back.
Yeah.
Like,
and so I don't know, like I even faced that, and I remember talking to Gabe one night because I felt God calling me to get baptized again, and he was like, I hope you know, like getting baptized isn't going to change you forever. And I was like, I know, like it's not, getting baptized isn't just going to make you new. And I was like, I know, because truthfully, like it's a proclamation of you believing in Christ and sharing that with others. But I think that there's this thought around like the fact of like giving your life to Christ is just going to make you whole and perfect again, and it's not like we're born into an imperfect world. And so we're going to have hard days and we're going to have ugly days, and there's literally days where you're on your face at the altar crying during worship because it's just the moment that you're in. And so worship isn't always pretty. Following God isn't always pretty. Living for God isn't always pretty and happy. And so that's what I told her. I was like, you are going to be surrounded by people, and I think that the best thing that you can do for your friends is just be authentic and show like the real world. And although we're Christians and we believe in a God who has done amazing things and who will save us and who has already saved us, doesn't mean that we live in a perfect world.
Yeah, like we don't live in a world that also is going to be like, oh, you have Jesus on your side, I'm going to leave you alone. Like, in fact, it's the opposite.
Quite the opposite.
And that is, I mean, that's something that God told us in the Bible. You know, like you're going to be persecuted and people are going to say things to you. And like off the baptism thing of like, the same things that you were struggling with before you got dunked in the water are gonna be there when you come out of the water.
And that's what, I went through a time of like such deep depression, and when I came out of that and I felt like God had delivered me from that, I got baptized after that, but that doesn't mean like I still deal with days and nights of depression and literally feeling like I cannot stand up and walk again. But because of what God has given me through salvation and through me just submitting and giving my life to him, he's given me an amazing community where they get to pick me up and say like, you know, on my hard days, we're here to help you, but it's not over.
And that's what I truly feel like friendship in the faith looks like. Yeah. Picking you up off the ground, holding you above water that you feel like you're drowning in. Yeah. And like to go back to the life group plug, because, you know, I'm so passionate about life groups. Like, and now I don't feel like I can call my life group friends like my life group friends. Like they're literally my family.
Your
like
friends.
They're just my friends now. They're not just in this bubble of like, oh, we meet every Thursday, blah, blah, blah. Like we went to a life group whenever we lived in Pittsburgh, and we went one time together and I went another time like without Chase. Yeah. And it just wasn't it.
Yeah.
Like, we never went back. It was not it. Like, sorry to those of you who are watching. My bad. It just wasn't it. Like, it wasn't our time. Like, God was not calling us to that. But then, like, we moved here and we joined a life group, and we showed up to the first day, and it was the first day that they had ever had the life group leaders. It was their first time leading. Like, there was 3 couples, me and Chase, and then Braxton and Audrey and Ashley and Trent. And, like, it was just us 6 people sitting there, like, talking about life. And, like, the first time, it might have been a little awkward, but it was like, ooh, there's something here.
Yeah.
And we came back. That was 4 years ago.
That's crazy.
That life group still meets on Thursday. Like, that's our family. And, like, we've got, I mean, they welcomed our baby into the world. Like, she's only 2. This life group has been going, like, they saw me through all the pregnancy. And it was rough. And, like, all of that. And, like, we have another, and obviously we've added more people to this life group as we've gone, but, like, we've had someone else welcome, two other people actually welcome a baby in. Like, we have one that's battling with infertility right now, and, like, we are walking through that with them, like, with every single, you know, member of that group. And, like, it's just so different whenever, and let me tell you, half them people that we met, like, we never would have met them if it wasn't for a life group. Like, we would not have even ran into each other in Walmart had we, like, not been in a life group together. And so, like, to get on the other side of a dinner table with people that don't look like you, like, don't do the same thing, aren't interested, like, in the same things that you're interested in, like, we don't have the same occupation, like, to meet those people is just amazing. Like, literally only something that God could have done, because we wouldn't have met each other otherwise. And, like, us becoming leaders at the church and stuff and doing stuff, like, they have really just supported in that, like, wholeheartedly. And, like, they want to help, they want to, like, volunteer and do things like that I don't know, it's just been amazing. Like, our life group is, like, honestly, our life group is the reason why we're still in Stephenville. We moved to Stephenville whenever Chase worked for Tarleton, coached baseball. Like, you couldn't have given me 1,000 darts and I would have thrown it at a map and hit Stephenville, Texas. Never. And so we moved here, and, like, for 3 years while Chase was coaching, we were like, yeah, we'll move out of here. Like, we'll move somewhere. Like, we won't stay here forever. And we just thought that. We really did. And then, like, we joined that life group, and, like, it just became harder and harder and harder to leave. And then we welcome Cam into the world, and, like, they all love her so much. And we have such a community here that, like, we bought a house this last April, and I'm like, what in the world? Like, I still think, like, what are we still doing in Stephenville? Like, he's from Kansas, and, like, I'm from Fort Worth. Like, we never would have thought we'd be in little podunk Stephenville, Texas. Like, and so it's just funny to see, you know, like, of course, whenever we say things like, you know, I would never do this, like, God's like
hold the phone.
Yeah. And so, I don't know, it's just really cool to see how they became such a huge part of why we're still here. And, like, I would have never thought that we had an opportunity to be leaders in the church at all, or, like, have the platform that we do from the stage, and, like, be able to minister to people in the capacity that we do. If we, you know, like, if we weren't here, we wouldn't be able to do that. There's no way anyone, I mean, I say there's no way anyone else has seen it, but, you know, that's God's plan.
No, it seriously is, because and this is totally off topic, but I want to talk about this really quick. How Chase literally went to youth camp with us, 2 years ago? And our church had went through something really big, and literally, like, 3 days before we left for camp, and they threw together this team of people, none of which had worked. Team of misfits, like. None of which had worked with our youth before, and sent us off from Texas to Colorado to watch these kids. And literally, I remember sitting at the table one day during, like, lunch, and Chase I think he was talking to Jake and I, and he was like, yeah, I think when I get home, I'm going to talk to Nick and Joe about possibly, like, taking over youth. And literally, we were like, what? Like, dude, we're just here for the week. And literally, now he's our youth pastor. And just to see, even from, that was 2 years ago. That's crazy. Just to see from 2 years ago how much has changed. And I remember literally meeting you through Kinsey And she was like, yeah, this is the lady that did my student teaching. And now me and Taylor are like best friends, and we get to share an office together. But literally, it was through community that God blessed us with. And so I think that's so cool and fun. Okay, just to kind of wrap it up, I want to get your insight on this, because she's a mom. She's a superwoman. She does all the things. She was a teacher for a while. She bakes freaking amazing cakes now and cookies, stuffed cookies. Like, what? How do you even do that? So how do you, in your walk with Christ and in kind of growing through life and stuff, how have you found like balance with the friends and family and your child now and your husband and working at church and jobs and all the things?
I can't tell you it's easy. I might have been crying on Monday about it. But it really, like, one life group, like, it's an expectation, you know, like, we went to life group because it was something that we could just continue to talk about the messages, and now it's like we just went to go see our friends. But then it's also like, it is a set time and date that you go. You know, you have dinner set. You know that you're going to be hanging out with your friends. It is a set time, you know. And so whenever I had Cam, I think we were away from our life group and we were leading it at that point. I think we were away from them for 4 or 5 weeks. And at that point, I was like, I miss my community. Like, get me out of here. And like, really, it wasn't even get me out of here. They were just coming in. And so it's just a set time. So I definitely recommend life groups. Like, I have Ashley and I go to lunch almost every Friday now. Like, but just having those weekly things that you do with people that, like, it's a non-negotiable if we don't go to life group. I say that. I mean, we're not going this week, but but that's just another thing. But like, figuring out where, like, I say it's a balance, but like, it's always changing, you know, like, there's ebbs and flows in life in general. And like, there's times when we're super busy with T-Rock and with youth. And then there's times whenever we're not, and we're busy with Cam, or Chase right now is, coaching softball. So like, he's gone all the time.
No, literally. And I'm like, their schedule is
crazy.
I'm like, what the heck?
It is crazy.
She's like, okay, I pick up the baby from school. I meet you for dinner.
Literally, like, in the next, 2 hours, we're about to like switch. We're like, here, pass the baby, and you're going to go to T-Rock. Like, okay, cool.
It's funny.
So, I mean, I think balance is a myth. I really do. Which sucks, because a person that like wants everything to be like perfectly aligned, like, it will never happen. It won't. And like, I could plan out every hour of my day, and like, even today I had every single hour planned out, and I still showed up 40 minutes late, like, because things happen, you know. And like, one, I think we need to give ourselves grace, but also when you have friends that are rooted in Christ and like know that you need community, they will come to your house in the mess. In the, like, yesterday Ashley came over because I was like, I just need my friend, like, I'm home by myself. Chase is out at a softball game. Like, I'm here with Cam. And she came and she sat on the couch for 30 minutes and talked to me. Like, it wasn't anything crazy. It wasn't like we got all dressed up. In fact, we have this like funny like thing that every single time we say, oh, we're going to go get all dressed up and go to dinner. Like, we always end up on the couch with in our PJs, like watching something on Netflix. Like, but community is so important. And as busy as we can get, like, that's the one thing that we think that we can drop and like, don't do it and cancel it, when that is the one thing that's going to keep you going. Like, a 3-hour conversation with your friend that is like so filling is going to keep you going through all of the craziness that you have going on in your life. And so, as much as balance is a myth, I still think that we need to make sure that we make time for our friends. And it really will just fill you up in ways that like you can't even describe. Like, it's like God gives you this like boost of energy, and you're like, oh, okay, now I can run through that brick wall and finish the week strong. Like,
makes you feel invincible.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like that's a really great place to end. You kind of put the cherry on the cake, on the milkshake, whatever.
Put the chocolate chips on the cookies.
There we go. Come on. So, well, thank you for coming on and spending a little while and getting to talk. We hope that some of the stuff today was encouraging to you guys, and just to kind of close it out. Oh, I do have one more question for you.
Oh, snap.
I forgot.
Period pop off queen. Had to say it one time.
What is a piece of advice that you wish you could tell your younger self? I forgot about this.
I even knew about this question and I was not prepared for it. Best piece of advice I could give my younger self. You don't have to be perfect.
Period.
They'll still love you.
Pop off queen.
Those that are meant to be there will still love you.
Yeah.
Even if you're not perfect. So.
Period. That was great. All right. Well, we want to say thank you guys for tuning in again and listening. I hope that something that we said today or several things that we said would be used to encourage you. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you guys next week. We'll have a new guest on, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Anyways, we look forward to seeing you guys next week. Bye for now.